We are all set to use routing and navigate from one component to another. Go to the default component, go to the HTML, app.component.html. This is where we stopped before we have implemented routing. When the user clicks on this button, he should be able to navigate to the next page in our application. Before we go ahead and implement that, the last step in routing is to include an element called router-outlet. This is an Angular element that we need to add to the starting HTML in our application, which tells Angular that it should initialize all the routes for our application so that we can use them. Next step, on this button, router link is equal to /start check-in. You need to use the path which you would have configured in your router module. Scroll down right here. Start check-in is the very first path and it will go to the start check-in component. So go back to the HTML. So when this button is clicked, automatically this router link attribute from Angular knows that it should be routed to start check-in. You can test this. If your server is up and running, your changes are automatically pushed. Go to Google Chrome. Right now this is how our application looks like. Click on start and that will go to the next page, which is start check-in works. Because we haven't implemented it, since it's a single page app, you see everything on the same page. So if you click on start, the output of the next component is on the very same page. You don't see a refresh. So the next component, if you go back to Visual Studio Code, is the start check-in component. Right here, go to the HTML and this is the output you are seeing. Let's change that. It says start check-in works. Instead, get rid of everything, use a H1, enter the reservation ID. This is the second screen in the application. Enter the reservation ID followed by a HTML input type is equal to within double quotes text, and then we can close that right there. Also add a BR and a button. On click of this button, we want to move on to the next page. We'll do all that in the next lecture. For now, call this button as next. So on this screen, the user will enter the reservation ID. We haven't binded it to any elements yet. We are going to do all that. We'll use the Angular data binding. But if you go back to the web browser, when he clicks on start, now he will come to a page where we will prompt him to enter the reservation ID. So after that, we don't need a line break. So move this H1 all the way to the end of it. Save it. Now once it comes back, we'll see that on the same line. We'll beautify this. We'll add some coloring, etc. to these buttons. But the key here, you have created the second screen where the user can input the reservation ID. On click of this next button, it should take the next action, which is to take this reservation ID and send it to the service, which will pull the reservation information and display it to the user on the next screen.